Welcome back, focused learners. We're diving straight into our next rules brief for Advanced 5th Edition. I'm your literal guide today, and we're cracking open Chapter 2, Downtime. We're going through this exactly as it's written in the system reference document. Every section, every paragraph, literally no embellishments here. These are the precise mechanical concepts you need to learn fully to master the game. So let's get our books open and begin.
Okay, let's dive into this. Today's agenda is packed. We're going to cover the basics of A5E downtime, crafting and engineering, gather info and recovery, religion and research, spellcraft, and finally training and work.
Section 1. Basics of A5E downtime. Let's start by looking at roughing it and lifestyle. So before we even look at specific activities, we have to talk about what happens between adventures, specifically the impact of roughing it. If you're sleeping out exposed to the elements during bad weather, freezing without warmth, or trying to rest without mosquito netting in a swampy, insect-ridden area, yeah, that's roughing it. Luckily, certain adventurers, like rangers, have features that let them totally ignore these effects. We also need to consider lifestyle, poor, moderate, or rich. This is absolutely crucial because it impacts your downtime interactions. The narrator might literally give you advantage or disadvantage on intelligence, wisdom, and charisma checks depending on how people perceive your lifestyle. All right. Core mechanics time. You undertake one downtime activity per week. A week here means 5 days, dedicating at least 8 hours a day to the activity. Whenever a rule says a month, just assume 4 weeks. Oh, and unfinished weeks? Generally, they don't count towards your progress. But you can work together. One character can assist another using the help action as long as both of you spend your downtime on that same chosen activity.
Now, what if you're in a super long campaign? Well, the rules give us specific math for extended downtime. Think of it this way. If your downtime spans a year or longer, the period extends to 1 month, which means you make 1 check per 4 weeks. A success equals 4 successful weeks of progress. A failure? That still gives you 2 successful weeks. But if you fail by 5 or more, you get 0 progress. And this scales up. For seasonal checks, a success is 12 weeks. For yearly checks, a success is a full 52 weeks. A failure is 26, and a failure by 5 or more leaves you with 13 weeks.
Section 2. Crafting and engineering. We're getting into materials and quality.
Crafting times vary strictly by the item you're making. If you want to make dual-wielding weapons, tools, or standard equipment, you can pump out 2 per week. Ammunition? You can make 50 a week. Martial or simple weapons, plus light armor, take exactly 1 week. Medium armor and heavy weapons bump up to 2 weeks, and heavy armor is going to take you 4 full weeks. Just a quick heads up, if you're trying to craft rare weapons, those might take longer, and that's strictly determined by the narrator.
Quality modifiers are a big deal because they dictate both the difficulty and the materials you need. Poor quality items only need materials equal to 1/8 the base cost, and the DC is an easy 10, but they gain the broken condition after every single use. Yikes. Normal quality needs 1/4 the base cost and hits DC 15. Fine quality? That needs half the base cost, is DC 20, costs an extra 25 gold, and it can be enchanted to uncommon rarity. Then there's Masterwork. This requires materials equal to the full base cost. It's a DC 25 check, costs an extra 125 gold, but it never has damage vulnerabilities and can be enchanted to any rarity. Here's an absolutely crucial rule. If you use special materials like adamant or mithril, the DC automatically goes up by 2. Furthermore, if you fail a crafting check by 5 or more, you produce a poor quality item and all your materials are entirely consumed. The craft activity actually expands into engineering for things like buildings and devices. Each check here requires a week of work, plus gold for materials. The complexity totally dictates your DC and cost. A rudimentary project, say a rowboat, is DC 13 and costs 10 gold per week. A moderate project, like a seafaring vessel or siege weaponry, jumps to DC 22 and 250 gold per week. And at the very top end, incredible projects, like building a sapient clockwork construct, that's going to demand a DC 32 check and a whopping 2,000 gold per week. And the physical scope of the project dictates how many successful checks you actually need. A tiny pocket watch, just 1 successful work week. A medium cabinet of automated minstrels takes 4. A large self-propelled wagon takes 8. Scaling way up, a huge locomotive engine requires 32 weeks, colossal steam-powered city gates takes 64, and monumental projects like an entire airship port or a palace require 128 successful weeks or more. Crucially, if you're building something huge or larger, you absolutely must have a team of assistants and laborers.
Section 3. Gather info and recovery. Let's talk about secrets and healing.
Gathering information is how you uncover secure or secret info about things that still exist within living memory.
You're hitting the streets, talking in taverns, and mechanically, this relies on an investigation check. Seeking uncommon info, like finding where a crime boss conducts business, is DC 10, takes 1 week, and costs 10 gold. Secret info, like uncovering the identity of an assassin guild leader, is DC 25, takes 5 weeks, and costs 500 gold or more. On a success, you learn the information. Succeed by 5 or more, you get an additional fact. On a failure, you learn nothing. But watch out, if you fail by 5 or more, you actually learn an incorrect piece of information that could lead you completely astray.
Now, a successful gather information check also grants a point of what's called key knowledge. This represents specific clues, secrets, or insights about an individual, creature, or location. You can spend these points to get advantage on an attack roll or ability check related to that subject. Or, at the narrator's discretion, you can use it to introduce a small fact to the story yourself. Keep in mind the narrator's limitation rule, though. If some information simply can't be gleaned, the narrator has to inform you before you even attempt the check.
All right, recovery. To do this, you must have or temporarily pay for at least a moderate lifestyle. Each week of recovery gives you 2 precise mechanical benefits. First, you get to make a Constitution saving throw against one effect that's preventing you from regaining hit points. Second, you get 1 additional saving throw against 1 disease or poison currently affecting you. And here's a great tip. If you're being tended to by someone who has a healer's satchel, you actually have advantage on these checks.
Section 4. Religion and Research. Piety and Libraries. Religious devotion means you need access to a shrine, temple, or sacred site, and you have to spend gold on sacred offerings. Then you make either a nature or religion check. Your DC and the cost depend exactly on your philosophical similarity to the deity. If you are strongly aligned, the DC is only 10 and the offering is 10 gold. If you're neutral, it's DC 20 and 50 gold. And if you are strongly opposed, well, the DC scales all the way up to 30 and requires a massive 500 gold offering. On a success, you gain 1 point of favor plus 1 extra point for every 5 points your result exceeds the DC.
So, how do we use favor? You can spend 1 point for a minor boon. That could mean advantage on a roll, discovering a useful item, or a helpful chance encounter, like finding a weapon right after you've been disarmed. For 2 favor points, the narrator might let you benefit from the effects of a first-level spell that aligns with the deity's portfolio. But take careful note of this. If you act against the interests or philosophy of a deity during an adventure, any points of favor are immediately lost, period.
Research is your method for uncovering obscure info, stuff faded beyond living memory or buried in bureaucratic records. You have to have access to an appropriate library and make an Arcana or History check. Uncovering uncommon info, like a village's original name, is DC 10, takes 1 week, and costs 10 gold. Secret information, like the true name of a fiend, is DC 25, takes 5 weeks, and costs 500 gold. The rules for success and failure here, including getting key knowledge or getting incorrect info if you fail by 5, mirror the gather information rules exactly. Bribes and fees determine the cost, but the narrator might just waive those if you already possess library access.
Section 5. Spellcraft. Let's look at creating rare spells.
Now, what's really interesting about this is how you pair your spell-casting ability with a specific skill to create or modify rare spells, like Arcana for wizards or Nature for druids. Then you mathematically tweak the base DC. An altered effect, like making a fireball deal cold damage, actually adds 0 to the DC. A lingering effect, like a slow spell that leaves a target fatigued, adds 1 to the DC. An additional effect, like an ice storm freezing a target, adds 2. And an additional target, like spreading a suggestion spell through conversation, also adds 2 to your base DC. The base DC and the cost scale right up with the spell's level. A first-level spell is DC 15, costs 100 gold per week, and requires 2 successful study weeks. A 9th-level spell, that's DC 23, 5,000 gold per week, and takes 10 successful study weeks. Succeeding by 5 counts as 2 weeks of progress, but failing by 5 means your materials are completely consumed and a week of progress is actively lost. Ouch. Also, to invent entirely new spells, you absolutely need the right library. Arcane tomes for wizards, sacred natural places for druids, or forbidden occult texts for warlocks. Creating a brand new spell takes at least 2 months per spell level and costs 500 gold per spell level for every single week. That's a massive investment.
Section 6. Training and Work. Learning and Earning.
Between adventures, characters can use downtime to learn new proficiencies, swap out previously learned features, or just earn some coin. The math for training is very precise. Want to learn a new language or tool? That takes months equal to 12 minus your intelligence modifier, and it runs you 50 gold per month. Without a tutor, that time doubles. Learning a new weapon takes 6 minus your highest strength or dexterity modifier in months, also at 50 gold a month. Relearning class features takes 1 week for low-level features, up to 4 weeks for features gained at levels 15 through 20. Swapping a feat takes months equal to 8 minus your proficiency bonus. Changing an archetype takes 12 straight weeks of mastery. But take note here, changing your core class is impossible through standard downtime. That requires powerful reality-altering magic like the Wish spell.
So the crucial point is how you support your lifestyle when you're out of coin, and for that, you turn to the work activity. Legal work requires a tool or skill check. On a 5 or less, you earn absolutely nothing and you take disadvantage on your next work check with that skill. Illegal work involves petty crime. An easy crime is DC 10, supports a poor lifestyle and nets 1d6 gold. A very hard crime is DC 25, supports a rich lifestyle and yields a nice 10d6 gold. But beware, failing an illegal work check by 5 or more forces you to lay low, meaning you lose your next week of downtime. And failing by 10 or more, you're caught by the authorities, busted.
And there you have it, the complete, unvarnished rules for Downtime in Advanced 5th Edition, exactly as they are written. We have analyzed the timelines, calculated the costs, and established the definitive DCs for everything from roughing it in a swamp to engineering a clockwork giant. With these precise mechanics now in your toolkit, I want to leave you with this. Which of these downtime activities will your character undertake before their next adventure? Study hard, and I will see you in the next explainer.